Paul Mcgann as the 8th Doctor is back in a brand new series of Doctor Who Big Finish adventures, as today I'm going to be starting off my look at the brand new era for the 8th Doctor in the 8th Doctor Time War series, as I take a look at Series 1 for brand new adventures with the 8th Doctor and his new companion Bliss, played by Raki Thakrar. Per usual, because this is the Time War, we get lots of explosions and lots of Daleks, and it is a little bit of a prequel to the War Doctor series, so before I even get into this box set, I would just like to say, if you've not yet checked out the War Doctor series, I have reviewed all 4 box sets that were released. I do recommend checking out that one. It was an incredibly fun series to in fact listen to, experimental in parts as well, so yeah, I do recommend checking out that series, maybe even before getting onto this one. However, this is probably a good place to start as well. Something that I was rather surprised by with this release is it isn't exactly a Big Finish newcomer release. Because we have the Night of the Doctor and things like that, I did expect this series to maybe be a little bit more relaxed. However, they've seemed to have done a little bit of the opposite with that, and it does seem to be a little bit more hardcore Big Finish. So a little bit more Dark Eyes, a little bit more technobabble in there, and arguably a little bit more Doom Coalition in there as well. So it's not exactly as simple as, say, Classic Doctor's New Monsters or 10th Doctor Adventures, which I guess is a good thing, because I think that every so often when you get too simple plots, it just gets a little bit dull. So having a box set like this one, which once again goes into the more complex Doctor Who stories, is definitely a welcome addition. That's not to say that it is too complicated. If you are somebody that is new to Big Finish, then you could probably get away with listening to this one first. However, at the same time, it may be a little bit daunting. But to start off, and as always, in the description below, I will leave the link to go buy this release from the Big Finish website. It's currently out now. For the pre-order price, the physical CD is £23 and the download is £20. And then if it's after this year, I do believe in fact December 31st, 2017, so if you're watching this in 2018, it will be at the standard recommended retail price of I do believe £30 or £35, and the download will also be a little bit higher as well. So yeah, I do recommend putting this one on your Christmas lists for this year, because it is an incredibly good listen, and it's got Daleks in and explosions, so literally what else could you want from life? Especially from Christmas. Yay, grim Doctor Who stories for Christmas. Fun. Going into the technical details for this release now, as per usual with all your 8th Doctor adventures, this is your standard 4-part box set, so much like Dark Eyes, much like Doom Coalition. We do have 4 standalone stories, however, because they do sort of share same writers, there is a little bit of an overarching theme throughout, and to be quite honest, you could probably refer to this as one whole episode, being 4 hours long, plus the behind the scenes at the very end, so it is a little bit of an odd format. However, at the same time, if you're somebody that is used to Dark Eyes or Doom Coalition, it's probably one of which you've probably seen quite a lot. So for the episodes now, episode 1 is the Starship Orpheus, written by John Dorney. Episode 2 is the Echoes of War, written by Matt Fitton. Episode 3 is the Conscript by Matt Fitton once again, and the final episode of the box set is One Life by John Dorney. So as you can see, this basically shares 2 writers for the whole box set, meaning as per usual, they can bounce ideas off each other really well, share different plots, share their aims for their different episodes. So I think that once again you've got a really nice self-contained story for this one, and you can quite obviously see that the writers have worked together on this release to in fact create a very nice box set. So yeah, that is good. And as per usual, your regular details. So this has been produced by David Richardson, a very good producer, probably one of my favourites in fact for Big Finish, and the script editor is of course Ken Bentley. Yay! Going into the casting credits for this release now, I'm not going to go into absolutely everybody because I will probably be here all day, but sort of stood out to me, so of course Paul Mcgann as the Doctor. It is nice to see that there is a little bit of a shift between the 8th Doctor that we know in Doom Coalition and Dark Eyes, and then sort of bringing in a little bit more of that darker, more sort of avoiding 8th Doctor that we did see in the Night of the Doctor. So I think there is a little bit of a shift in his character, a little bit more character development in there, and I would love to see throughout the next box sets as well that maybe he develops a little bit further, it gets a little bit darker, gets a little bit more disconnected from Gallifrey. That would be really nice to see. But yeah, Paul Mcgann for this release, he just has a wonderful voice, doesn't he? Paul Mcgann is a brilliant Doctor, definitely Big Finish have let him widen out as the Doctor and do many different things. I think that for this release it definitely can show his different strengths. He can be very happy in points, very dark. He can also be a very fun Doctor at the same time, very much a new series Doctor to an extent. But Mcgann is in fact creeping up there on my list of Doctors, the more releases that I listen to of him, because he's just such a fun Doctor that can, as I say, go to many dark places as well as many fun places at the same time. I have Raki Thakrar for this release as well, playing the companion of Bliss, which there is a little bit of confusion at the very start of the story, which I will let you figure that out for yourselves. But yeah, Bliss is a very interesting companion. I think that we're sort of almost introduced to her straight away, almost immediately. We don't really get much time to actually develop her character at the very offset. However, the script actually allows for her to bring out certain character traits, certain parts that are actually sort of her strong points, her weaknesses, and I think that generally for this release, I did expect to see her a little bit more. I think that when comparing her her amount of appearances compared to the whole running time of the whole box set, this is definitely more a character piece for the 8th Doctor rather than Bliss, and I think that a lot of people will probably refer Raki Thakra as one of the in-the-running companions when we were unaware that Purmaki would be the next companion. She was absolutely all over saying that she would be the next one, and obviously she wasn't, it was Purmaki, so I think that maybe Big Finish did pick up on that when that was an article a few years back. And I do know that Matt Fitton was in fact wanting to get Raki Thakra for quite a while to be the companion. I think that generally she did do a very good role. I thought that she was a nice companion, something a little bit different. She does have a little bit of a backstory with Earth, there isn't really too much in there. However, I would like to see in the future box sets maybe her character developed a little bit more of a relationship with the Doctor as well. However, at the same time, I kind of like that she is her own independent character and can do her own thing, because I think especially when it comes to the Time War, you do need a very strong female for that, and a very sort of more independent character that could maybe be a little bit more of a warrior. So yeah, as I said, I would like to see that developed a little bit more in the future box sets. So moving on to the opening episode of the box set, the Starship Orpheus, written by John Dorney. Now what I really like about this one is it doesn't feel like a Time War episode to start with. In the behind the scenes, John Dorney makes it very clear that he wanted to make it feel like a standard Doctor Who story at the very beginning. We're introduced to this luxury space liner where odd and creepy things are going on, where people are going missing. It is your stereotypical sort of mysterious going on a luxury liner, a little bit Robots of Death, a little bit Voyage of the Damned in there, but I do really like the way that we start off with a normal setting, a normal Doctor Who story that could literally take place throughout at any moment in the 50 years of Doctor Who, that all of a sudden, within a few seconds, the Time War just hits it like that, and it sort of shows the impact of the Time War. It's a really nice comparison where you have this rather mysterious plot at the very start of the story, and then by the very end, we have the Time War raging, Daleks blazing everywhere, killing people literally within the first few minutes. I do believe that they've shot at least 10 people, which is brilliant. I think that the Daleks for this box set are a little bit more ruthless. They don't exactly appear in it too much. I would say that we get used to sort of more one Dalek rather than a ton of Daleks at once. I think that they maybe would be nice to see them a little bit more ruthless in other box sets, but get more and more evil throughout the box sets. I think that would be really nice to see. But yeah, I think that for this one, it's just a really good way to introduce the characters. There is a rather unusual plot to start with, where we have the Doctor with his companion that we already know, but we don't at the same time. It is a little bit confusing. It keeps you guessing what exactly is going on because the characters change names all the time, and I think that the way that John Dorney has written this one makes it complicated. However, at the same time, it really nicely reflects the way that the Time War is in fact infecting the characters, because you think that you have listened to the story incorrectly. There is in fact a moment very early on that I start the track again when listening to it because I thought that I'd missed a part out. Turns out that it's just the Time War sort of working its way into the story, changing people's names, people's motives, and sort of the different things that are going on. So yeah, it's a rather unusual one. However, I love the way that that affects the whole story, and in a way it just literally rip it apart. I think one of the opening things that I really wanted with this box set, and I never really go into box sets with aims, but with this one I wanted it to be a lot more bleak, a lot more grim, because it's the Time War and I really like bleak stories, as you all probably know by now. And the thing is with this one, is you go into it seeing this very happy story that is just your standard Doctor Who episode. However, you know something is going to happen because this is in the Time War box set, so that building up all the way throughout, you have a little bit of a glimmer at the very start of the story to the future of what's going to happen, and this sort of Gallifreyan that is about to regenerate but can't at the same time, so he's eventually pretty much being sent to his death. So there's a few sort of grim moments at the very beginning, and then throughout you get a few sort of splinters of time showing how this is eventually going to progress to show this sort of full catastrophe unfolding out. So I think that the way that we have this rather happy plot to start with, but you know it's not going to last very long, I think that is a really nice way to open the box set. Episode 2 is Echoes of War, written by Matt Fitton. Now this one is an episode that I think has been played around with quite a lot when it comes to Doctor Who. I think that some of the elements of this episode have sort of been played into other stories. However, I really like the way that this one has in fact been compared to the Time War. I think the way that it's been brought into the sort of Time War theme was very creative. If this episode is you have this refugee team, Bliss and the 8th Doctor, on this planet, and they need to try and get off it as quick as possible because the Starship Orpheus has just exploded in the atmosphere, and sort of going on this journey. And then throughout this episode you get sort of little glimmers once again of past, present and future of the Time War raging through this planet. And at the very start you have this very nice jungle planet, very peaceful, lots of different animals, and it's all very nice and chirpy. You have birds in the sky and everything like that, and then by the very end it's a disaster. Everything has died, there is fire everywhere, and the Daleks are pretty much invading. This episode in fact reminded me of the War Doctor Volume 4 episode Pretty Lies. I think it opened the box set and you have this desert planet where it's all happy to start with, and you get used to the characters reactors, and then by the very end the Daleks come back and explode everything, and everybody dies. And yeah, I think that this episode has a few of those themes worked throughout it as well, and we're introduced to a Dalek, or a Dalek called Dal, that doesn't know it is a Dalek, and the 8th Doctor has this rather interesting moment where it tries to be friends with the Dalek, tries to manipulate its mind, and throughout the whole episode, this Dalek is a part of the refugee team. Get a happy little relationship with this Dalek where it thinks it's actually sort of helping everybody out, is helping them get back to the TARDIS by using sort of the system within a Dalek, sort of the technology to locate the TARDIS and things like that. And I think that this episode really does play with the idea of how can you make a bad thing good. At the very end we have the Doctor confronting this Dalek, and we do think for a brief second that this Dalek is in fact turning good, but something happens and we never find out if it in fact worked in the very end. It's one of those stories that is rather twisted and plays with the idea of what makes a villain a villain. If you remove that factor, does it make them good again? So yeah, I do like the way that that was used in this episode. Episode 3 of the box set is The Conscript, once again written by Matt Finn, and this in fact has a little bit of an overarching theme with the episode previously. We do have a little bit of a connection where Elistra comes to the planet and in fact takes all the refugees as well as the Doctor to Gallifrey, and then we have the idea of conscription. Now, as you can see by the title, this is referring to World War I and World War II and sort of the human elements of war, and then implementing that onto the Gallifreyan wars, and I think that this is my favourite entry for this release because it just manipulates the idea of the human war and then applying that to Gallifrey. And I think that this episode is in fact rather dark. We have Cardinal Elistra sending the Doctor to go and be conscripted. He is surrounded by different soldiers for this release from many different chapters, so if you're somebody that does like Gallifreyan history, the different houses on Gallifrey, things like that, then I would definitely recommend this box set alone for this episode. And we are introduced to this commander called Commander Harlan. I'm going to get that right, it is Commander Harlan, isn't it? Yeah, Commander Harlan, and he is basically a notorious Gallifreyan commander who, if anybody is going to be able to brainwash the Doctor in order to take part in the Time War, he will be able to. And I think that with this episode, we're introduced to different exercises where we have the Doctor and his different soldier friends being sort of brainwashed into becoming soldiers for the Time War, and we have the Doctor being the Doctor, rebelling, and then everybody else because of that suffers. So I think that this episode does base the idea around teamwork and how different people are punished. So at the very start of the story, we are introduced to this planet, and it is sort of known as something that the Daleks won't be able to get into. The sky trenches are protecting it. Of course, you know that eventually in this story, this force and the sky trenches are going to fall to the Daleks, and then they're sort of all going to come through and the Daleks are going to invade. And that is, of course, surprise, surprise, what happens. And you have all the amateur soldiers and they need to sort of defend themselves. And I think that my only complaint for this one, it is predictable, I would say. That whole idea is quite predictable. However, at the same time, I like what this episode does. I like the idea of bringing in the human aspects of war, and I like the way that has been implemented. So the flower in there is one, the emblem of that being somebody who's a coward given to different people if they are cowards in certain situations, something very much that did happen in our world wars. And yeah, I just like the idea, as I said, that historic element implemented onto the Time War for this release. And I think that my only complaint really for this one is maybe down to that predictability, but at the same time, I wanted it to be a little bit more grim, as per usual. I just wanted it to be a little bit more sort of forcing the Doctor to go into this situation and be a little bit more combat-y, forcing him to maybe do things that he didn't want to do, such as say hold guns and stuff like that, and maybe even show Commander Harlan to be a little bit more of a force more powerful than the Doctor, because the sonic screwdriver is destroyed in this story as well, so he's left a little bit more defenceless and the Doctor needs to use his own mind to kind of get out of the situation. But at the same time, I'd maybe like to see Commander Harlan being a little bit more of a higher power or something like that, and having a little bit more of an authority over the Doctor, and maybe having a little bit of power play throughout this whole episode. But yeah, I think that generally for this one, it's still a good one. Would it be maybe just nice to have a little bit more of a few darker elements in there? But let's face it, would it even be one of my reviews without me asking for it to be darker? Because I always like darker Doctor Who stories, because I'm grim. Doctor is reunited with his refugee friends and his companion in the final episode of the box set, which is One Life. And once again, we have Cardinal Elistra in this episode. She's a little bit more of an enemy for this release, because she is there for the majority of this one. However, she's just a little bit of a pain in the arse. She's not happy at any point. She's sort of always picking on the Doctor, saying all of his weaknesses, saying all of his issues. And the main idea for this one is based around that couple relationship that Rupert and Quarren have, and throughout the episode we are introduced to different flashbacks and the way that we have them sort of getting to know each other, the different events throughout their life, such as their wedding day, the day that they first met, their first date. So it's a little bit cliche to that extent. However, at the same time, I think that John Dorney really nicely plays that. I think that he's very good at writing people. We already know this from his Doom Coalition entries, such as say Absent Friends, an award-winning episode in fact that is very much based around that idea of human emotion. I think once again for this release, John Dorney has came out on top form for this one, really getting introduced to the characters and really sort of playing with the ideas of emotions and feelings and the different relationships that people have. And as I say, I like that personal effect that has been applied to the Time War, because the Doctor is one of those people that refuses to fight. So naturally you cannot have front war battle sequences, you can't have massive wars going on. If anything, that should have been something that maybe was used a little bit more in the War Doctor adventures, and it wasn't really used to an extent that much, but at the same time I can understand why, because with it being on audio, you couldn't really have just 15 minutes of explosions and exterminates and people screaming, because that wouldn't be an actual story. So I do think that the way that they've scripted around that is okay. However, for this one, as I say, I like that idea of having the Doctor sort of lurking around on the edges and slowly getting closer and closer to the front. Assuming that throughout the whole of these box sets, he will get a little bit closer and more closer to actually joining the Time War, to eventually at the very end become, of course, to the Night of the Doctor, and then eventually regenerate into the John Hurt Doctor. But yeah, I think that generally for this one, as a final story, as I say, it really nicely plays with that idea of emotion and almost the idea of gods as well, as we are introduced to Quarren, sort of. I'm not going to say really what happens with him. Basically, we have a few themes that are copied across from the new series, and we also have the idea of Gallifreyan weapons in there as well, and we have almost a little bit of playing God. So yeah, that's quite fun, and once again, our idea of power overarching over the Time War is one of the main ideas that you can play with the idea of the War Doctor and the 8th Doctor box sets, that idea of weapons and gods to be used quite a lot with these releases. So overall for the Time War Series 1, I think that this series is off to a really good start to introducing a few experimental elements to the Time War and showing how the Doctor can sort of lurk around in the shadows as well as sort of slowly creep towards the front of eventually fighting in the Time War itself. So yeah, a really good set of releases. I think that this format for this series definitely works rather well, having the independent stories in there, however having that overarching theme also in there as well to sort of make it one whole story. However, as I was saying at the very start of this review, I wouldn't exactly recommend this set of episodes to a new series listener or a newcomer to Big Finish. I think that definitely there is a few more other releases in there that you could listen to beforehand, before getting to this one, otherwise it may be a little bit daunting. Much like Doom Coalition, Dark Eyes, it does rely a little more on sciencey techno-babble and sort of references to other stories in there to actually fully understand it. However, at the same time, I don't think it is as complicated as other stories that I've listened to, especially such episodes as Doom Coalitions 3 and 4. If you're somebody that has listened to those releases and understood them, then I definitely recommend this episode for you. If you're an 8th Doctor fan or a Dalek fan, I recommend this era as well. And if you're somebody that generally wants to get used to a new version of the 8th Doctor, then I do also recommend this release. So yeah, the general forecast for this series is in fact rather unusual, because unlike Dark Eyes and Doom Coalition, we aren't getting 2 box sets a year. The series is not like that. The next series is in fact in July 2018, and then from then onwards, every single year up until 2020 will in fact have a Time War release. So this is in fact an annual box set as opposed to 2 box sets per year. And then in between them, from what I'm understanding, from what I'm gathering on Twitter, we are also going to have the sequel to Doom Coalition, which is 2 box sets every single year as well. So basically, we're getting some extra Paul Mcgann, a whole box set extra of Paul Mcgann each year. So yeah, I'm not arguing with that, because Paul Mcgann is brilliant. If you have any questions about this release, then definitely leave them in the description below and I will respond to them at some point. Thanks for watching this review, and I'll see you all in the next one, whatever that may be. Bye for now.